to Frazer Rice here, and he's actually in the live spirit.
Here we are at FinCon 8 2018. It's a lot of fun.
Hey, Simple Passive Cash Flow listeners. I wanted to invite you to the Simple Passive Cash Flow Nation Mastermind and Wine Tour happening June 30th in Seattle, Washington, or we might head out to Woodinville. We don't know. Approximately meeting time around noonish to go into the evening. Might even have a little dinner at the end after all the wine festivities are done. It's a good time to meet other passive investors in the SPC ecosystem. I will be doing a little bit of dynamic networking just because people in this tribe seem to be a little bit of introverts and needs help mixing and mingling. So I'll be kind of help facilitating that. We'll do a few table topics about some chosen subjects that you guys can suggest. If you are a mastermind member in the group coaching, simplepassivecashflow.com/journey. If you haven't heard about that, it is free for you to attend. And also if you're a current shareholder or a current investor in a Hui deal, that is free for you to attend. So it's going to be a very exclusive group of people, a lot of credit investors. And if you would like to join the group, it's going to be a $50 cover charge, and that helps us to keep out the riffraff who like the cheap, easy, and free stuff. So if you guys are more interested in that, shoot me an email at lane@simplepassivecashflow and sign up here at the website, simplepassivecashflow.com. And you can pay right on the site securely via credit card. All right, if you guys have any questions, let me know, and hope to see you in Seattle on June 30th. Bye.
Actually, I gave an interview to 4 or 5 guys earlier yesterday. Guys in the professional world, with a lot of the listeners here, and they're trying to work in this side hustle.
Right.
So you are working now not too long ago. Can you talk a little bit about that and where did this come from?
Sure. So I started out as a wealth advisor. Even before that, I came out of law school to be a lawyer. Billable hour, and I were very good friends. So I went to wealth management and worked for a guy who liked the idea of lawyers as issue spotters, and that the answer to everything wasn't no or it depends. And it got me in front of wealthy people. I worked at that for about 16 years. Basically, one of the main things that I did was to advise people on their issues, on their tax situations, on their investment management situations, and to help them realize their goals and make sure that they didn't go backwards or have any problems with the markets. To that effect, essentially what happened was about, 2.5 years ago, I got really interested in the media side of things. I started up a podcast, FrazerRice.com. I was interested in web design and media. And then at the beginning of 2017, I've had some real success with some nice clients, brought over some real assets. And I thought there was some stories to tell about that. Talking about the 1% and the issues that they face, and put that into a book form that a lot of people could use, and maybe even people outside of the 1% or the advisors that advise them could take some of those lessons. So I wrote the book. That was essentially done at the beginning of 2018, and I saved up some money during 2018 with some work successes, and I launched it in August. And so it went from sort of side hustle or something that helped complement my practice into being more of a full-time thing. So I've burned the boats like Cortez, and I'm out sort of generating a bunch of different revenue streams with it, and trying to sort of get my advice out into the public and help them both at the high net worth level, but also at the sort of lower income levels or lower asset levels, try to take some of the lessons that the 1% have learned and that I've sort of seen in my experience, and try to impart that a little bit further down the line.
Right. So you guys listening at home still working the day job kind of take some inspiration here. That there's a little bit of the strategic planning here on the book launch and working on the book at late in the evenings and weekends. But
it definitely, I fit it into a bunch of different free time zones, and it's something that I spent a lot of time thinking about and trying to prepare those first 3 months when I'd be going in alone, and then my first 9 months, and sort of making sure I had the financial bandwidth to do that.
Right. So a lot of the people listening here, I would call it the 20%.
Right.
They have very skewed stats here, but a lot of the guys listening are making over $1 they're not uber rich. They may not be the 1%, but they're definitely going to get there. I believe to get into the 1%, you need to be in it for a generation.
Sure,
You need to start
certainly,
there.
certainly a generation. I think it's a lot of hard work to get there. Starting from different backgrounds or from sort of a small base of assets. It takes time. As you know, the power of compounding. You can get that working in your favor. That's how you end up well-being in the 1%.
Right. And then the whole podcast listener, it seems like it's a self-selecting of hardworking, sort of that type A personality, where they're grinding and grinding it. So it typically is the first generation wealth builder.
Right.
I've had a very small minority where their parents, they had some real estate, they started from there, and then now they're kind of picking up where they last left off, or trying to take it to the next level. But as someone who's advised the 1%, what are some concepts that you kind of picked up along the way that people at home, as they make their way through the journey to the 1%, that they kind of...
Well, I think one of the important things is that the people who are successful, I think we're saying 1% are people who are successful, they read a lot, they learn a lot, they think broadly, not only deeply about the things that they're good at, they read broadly and meet a lot of people in wide experiences so that they get better and they progress. I think the people who get in trouble or sort of stay in one slot, either career-wise or otherwise, and it sort of levels off, and then other competition comes in, and then or real estate assets depreciate, need a lot of work, and you don't have the assets to keep them going. The people who continue to learn and get better and do more things tend to be really successful. I think there's a certain component of financial literacy that takes place. I just talked about the power of compounding before. That's one component. I think certainly in the 1%, one thing that people are concerned about are transferring values from their generation to the next generation. I think a lot of what happens when you get to a certain level of wealth is that you want the things that made you successful to happen for your kids. So a lot of the struggle that takes place many times is when the people are worried about having trust fund kids or entitled kids or not having any sort of appreciation for what generated the wealth in the first place. So I spend a lot of time trying to educate people and helping them understand what those values are, making sure they know what those are, and trying to get people to transfer those values to the next generation, and making sure that there's good communication between the generations so that when you're ready to transfer that wealth or transfer that business or transfer that real estate to the next generation, that there's a clear understanding amongst the next generation, especially if you have a lot of siblings, that there's context around the planning and there aren't hurt feelings, because when there are hurt feelings and there's conflict, that gets extremely expensive, and that's where it gets really difficult as it relates to expensive conflict.
So I'm actually in the process of putting together my trust.
Mm-hmm.
On kids, but we're putting in these mechanisms where at age 25 they get X amount of dollars, at age 35, at age 45 they get another tranche of money.
Right.
Again, it's just very rudimentary and they're hard set mechanisms. But what are some of the softer skills, maybe as a grid that you're trying to teach the younger generation? And how are you as an advisor telling your clients that can transfer these types of skills?
Well, one of the interesting things is getting that financial literacy, or at the very least a sense of common sense around what you're doing. And it can start really early. I think when you deal with issues as it relates to, let's say, an allowance, for instance. I think if you were to give a typical practice note that I do advise people is to say, if you're giving an allowance of, say, $5 to your kids, to put in the mechanism where you take $2 back, what does that do? It creates an appreciation for taxes. And if you install that early on, there aren't surprises later on. And people get their first paycheck and say, what's this TICO score? I don't understand this. And wait, I said I was going to be making $100,000 and I'm only taking 60. What is that? If you get that sort of installed early, that's an important feature. I think another really good feature as it relates to family decision making is the idea that if you have a philanthropic component, let's say you're giving $4 away and you have 3 kids, having each kid give away $1, first of all, from a data point perspective, you understand what's important to them. But then on the $4th, to have the kids decide together how to give that dollar away, that to me is a very powerful way to get kids working together, especially around issues of money, in a way that not only gets them thinking about money, but it gets them thinking about the things that are important to each other. And these little things, these very small dollars, you can operate with on that front. Add on to that the concept of a family vacation. If you have a family vacation fund, say it's $1,000, and you have the kids invested. They learn about stocks and bonds and investing, and what happens if it goes up and what happens if it goes down. But what it also does is it creates the idea of accountability, not only accountability amongst themselves, but accountability with other people, the parents. If you're committed to doing it, it teaches really good lessons about making decisions together about money issues that have an impact, but it's not impact that's so large that it could have an impact on the overall family wealth. So these are exercises done early on that I think are good little factoids that kind of help you develop the data points that you understand your kids understand you. As you're transferring the real wealth, especially real estate, you have an idea of what's going on.
Like baby steps, so if something gets out of line,
right. Well, and I think too, as you just said, you're putting together trusts for your real estate. I think a very good standard operating procedure is to review your estate plan around major events and also a couple of other types of things. So I tend to break that down as to births, marriages, divorces, deaths, sales of businesses, inheritances, that type of thing. And then the final one is change in tax law. So we just had a major one from selection a year and a half ago, more than a year and a half ago. And so for people who haven't looked at their estate plans lately, there may be things in place that have been installed in the legal system that you might be able to take advantage of, or that you should be worried about with your estate plan.
So one thing I still do for the folks that are in the investor club is that I do free calls. Mostly, I just like to get to know people, get to know where their heads at. And I've gotten pretty good at this. In like about 15 minutes to get a sense of a person's personality, what their feelings are with money, and get a sense of is this a generous person? Not to say that they're a little stingy or not that they're a bad person,
right?
But it's interesting to get a sense of people's habits in terms of are they a giver, are they a taker? Just takes. They're always looking for that deal, 20% off, or
right?
It's just a big thing as opposed to that generous. They just put it out in the world because they trust that it comes back. They came from that environment where they grew up in that.
Mm-hmm.
What are some ways, like you mentioned, given the family decides to give to charity cause? What are some other ways to kind of incite that without making the child just trust the kid? Just knowing that there's always going to be money there, and there's no.
Right. Well, I guess it's a tough question because I think every family and every dynamic is a little bit different, and dynamics change. You can start off at a certain level of wealth and have all this different planning that's happened, and then all of a sudden your business explodes upward or downward, and everything that you kind of built around for the first 15 or 20 years doesn't exist anymore. I think it really comes back to what I talked about before in some ways, is to try to get a baseline of information about what's important to the kids as they grow up, and to try to instill some sort of spirit of philanthropy is a nice thing. It doesn't always take, but at the same time, try to understand what they are good and not good at. One area where I think a lot of complication exists is when, let's say you had a couple of kids, and one of them is sort of an investment banker, really good at numbers, business oriented, and so on, and the other one is very sort of philanthropic and joins the Peace Corps and does very valid things that aren't measured necessarily on a dollar basis. Right, and so I think I'm not a parent, but I've been around enough of them and had enough family situations where I look at it and say, okay, there is value in each of those, even though it's not necessarily measured in dollar terms. And the art to good estate planning is to try to, I wouldn't say treat both kids equally within the estate plan, but to treat them equitably so that they understand why and how you're making the decisions that you're making. Plenty of estate plans where people give all their money away and say, you know what, I want everybody to start at home plate, not at third base, and I want them to row their own boat, experience that. That's okay too, but to sort of demonstrate that and have that be a surprise to the kids, I think can be damaging. And that's where sort of the kids understand where you're coming from earlier on, and you're having those exercises where you're all working together, there are fewer surprises later on and less of a chance of conflict.
I would say the vast majority, 90% in the investor club, or maybe again it's a self-selecting group that are hungry, they're listening to podcasts, so they're just listening to their jams and their Maserati or their Lexus, whatever. But they're in their Corollas or whatever you guys are, Camrys or whatever you guys are driving these days. But they're in this, and they're coming from meager beginnings. So it's kind of neat seeing maybe about 10% of the investor club members, they have wealth. The parents have real estate. They get it, but they just want to take it to the next level. And they're switched on to the fact that, hey, I want to grow this bigger so that I want to give it away, as opposed to, oh, my simple passive cash flow number is 30 grand because I want to go on these firms and grow this jet or whatever. It's truly some other bigger meaning.
Well, I would add on to that, there's a typical bromide that's out there, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. And I think for the families that have the kind of wealth that they're passing on, and maybe passing on to their grandkids, as you get more and more kids within the family, there's going to be less and less wealth to support it. The liabilities are growing geometrically while the assets may be growing linearly. So that the numbers just don't work out long term. So you're going to need entrepreneurs in the succeeding generations to keep the assets going. So the assets have a chance of growing geometrically to keep pace with the rest of the beneficiaries, with the kids. And so I think what you're talking about is great, where there are people who want to take the business to the next level. That I find that to be inspiring and something that's a value that's great to instill in people, because that's ultimately how you keep the family fortune going, growing, and surviving. Because there are a lot of different things that are attacked.
I mean, you also hear about sometimes they'll skip a generation because they know the kids will just be income. Maybe we cross our fingers that the grandchildren sort of pick it up.
Right. Well, the scary part with that, though, is that I hear less about skipping generations than I do that sort of the first generation makes the money, the second generation kind of holds it, sort of enjoys it. The third generation really spends it because they become accustomed to all the trappings that have happened with the wealth, and then the fourth generation is back to zero and has to start over again. And so, what you're talking about, the skipping generation part, that'd be great. It's not great, but if they have a situation where the second generation spent the money down and they realize that they have to get things going and bring them back up again, that's a good one. But I think most people at the first generation would like to see sort of a smoother transition and instill sort of a general family notion that entrepreneurism should be a big component of it. That's how you have your family persist through time.
Right. I mean, perfect example. I mean, from Hawaii, I would say about 10-20% of my investors are from Hawaii. And it's very, just like you said, grandparents aged 2 generations above me, they had all this wealth because they saved their money very meager beginnings, and they invested in some real estate 50, 60 years ago. Now the generation before that, my parents' generation of baby boomers, they just held on to that wealth. They didn't know how to create it. They pretty much lost it at negative 5-10% a year. Mm-hmm. And then now it's our generation, the millennial, Gen X generation. So it's, well, our parents didn't know what the heck they were doing. So how can they teach us what to do? Right. Grandparents are gone 5-10 years, and a lot of times we still I see it all the time. That generational wealth gets passed on to my generation, $1 million, $2 million house, and then what do we do? But build on the house and build a bigger one, because if you don't know what the heck you're doing, if you don't have a role model, right, the person to tell us what to do.
One of the most important things that I try to tell clients and other people that are interested is the idea that if you can collect the stories from the grandparent level, with the people who built the wealth, and collect those stories and the values that help create that before they die. Ultimately, when they die, that institutional knowledge goes away. And it's those stories, how did we do it? What did we have to do? Where did the wealth come from? Why are we here where we are able to enjoy these things? You give yourself a chance at transferring the values that help make that wealth in the first place. If it's gone, it's very difficult to recreate. You have to start reading Warren Buffett books and other types of things to try to pick other examples out to use in your own situation.
So a lot of the listeners, they're maybe in their late 30s to early 50s at this point. They may have a few kids. One of them may be that they may have three kids. Two of them may just be off in the biz doing whatever. One of them may be the shining star in the group. What would you suggest for you pick one to be, hey, you're gonna have to watch over your other brothers and sisters. We're gonna teach it to you for the chosen one.
Well, there's definitely issues of aptitude, sort of availability, and interest to be able to do these types of things. And hopefully, if you've raised your kids right, or followed their progress, you see who's good at what and who's interested in what, and you're able to figure out who can run the show if possible. And there may be a situation where no one can run the show and you need an outside group to do it, or if you have a business or real estate that doesn't have a natural successor to run, that you may have to sell that because people aren't in place to be able to run it correctly or grow it or otherwise maintain it. It's going to end up moving away. Those are tough decisions. That's all part of sort of gathering the data points about what your family's about and who can do what and who's interested. And then it gets into further complication because you have sort of what's called the human resource side of things, where you find out who's capable and available to do things. But then the other part is to make sure that everyone understands the whys, that the emotional component doesn't use things. In your example, the two people who are off doing other things, you sort of done all the human resources component to figure out how to get the business transferred to the next generation, who's going to run it within the family. But the other two aren't part of that discussion, and they come back and say, well, wait a minute, we want to be a part of it. And say, well, you're not competent to do it, seemingly available. That may not matter in the planning. They may be able to create conflict and all sorts of other issues. And that's what you want to try to avoid. That's why you want to try to build those relationships in that working together component as early as possible.
Now you've got intersibling conflict.
Right, and intersibling conflict can be litigious and messy, but not much fun. And then you add on the fact that they're all going to start marriages too. So you have spouses and their kids. So even though they may come from the same place, their lives are going to be very different. And you can only plan so much for it. So you have to have a good line of communication early often and good experience in dealing with problems, hopefully small ones at the moment, so that when you get to the bigger ones, just the messier conflict, you have less of a chance of it. You have the ability to have adult discussions over things that require really adult supervision.
Right. And I think you mentioned, I'll highlight what you mentioned, the why. The why can't be, oh, I want to get financially free or I want to retire. Retirement's a little overrated if you just want to play golf. You need to figure out a bigger why.
Right.
Because how, you can live that way, but how can you communicate that bigger why to your offspring down the line if you don't even have it yourself?
It's a big thing. I mean, I think what I try to talk about in the book is when you transfer from one type of wealth to another, you've got to put some thought into not only how much do you cost, but what's your purpose going to be. And if you haven't thought about that ahead of time, and you haven't designed your planning around that, you may end up having to unwind a lot of time as you figure things out. But that's a scary place to be too. Inexpensive and uncomplicated, and it creates more questions than answers and all of that stuff. A lot of forethought in trying to understand what you're going to do with yourself once you become successful. And if you indeed go down the road of retirement, I think the idea is then to say, okay, what do I want to do with myself, with the resources and advantages I presented myself with? And that's really the next step, is to say, okay, once I've got that down, I tend to say it's a good idea to write these things down so that you commit to it a little bit more. Then you build your planning off of it, and you sort of design how the next stage of life is going to look so that the assets don't evaporate, or you end up with a boatload of regret and say, well, I can only play so many rounds of golf. You go back and start something else, but then you're kind of out of the game.
Right. I mean, me personally, the reason I come out to these FinCon events is I think at the deep core of it, I want to help people financially, just with basic stuff, because I don't think there's any good financial education out there for the masses. How to do the budget, if you balance a checkbook, that type of basic stuff. there are a lot of cool worksheets here you can download for free, but I just don't know how to put it all together. But my why is sort of out there. I don't know how it's going to end.
I think you and I park our cars in the same garage on this, and it's something that I've looked at this, and I'm really worried about is the lack of financial literacy early on. I tend to think that sort of a CFP, that type of curriculum taught somewhere in high school level, where people understand what stocks and bonds do, what the power of compounding is, what depreciation is, what happens when you borrow money, what is leverage, those types of things. That's important to know at the high school level because people are making multi-$100,000 decisions about things like college and so on, and what majors they're going to take. And those can be expensive decisions and ultimately expensive mistakes if people just assume that the world's going to go on without them in good shape. And leverage doesn't matter, debt doesn't matter, how I manage my finances and how do I save my retirement, but that's all going to be taken care of. That doesn't exist anymore. And so I think the earlier that can be taught, and I think high schools don't know because the math theoretically should be at the right level. I think that's important. I'd go so far as to say things like the power of compounding should be taught as early as the fourth grade, so that you understand what happens if you save and use time to your advantage, or if you borrow and you use time at your disadvantage, that has major implications. Those concepts translate. I think that the earlier they get bedded in, the more better decisions are being made by a broader group of people.
So you guys listening at home, if you guys want to check out this,
there we go.
Well, actually, hopefully it doesn't.
We'll switch it around, right? Yeah, right.
So you guys check out that book. You might get some good ideas. But what if that's not enough? What's the next step?
Sure.
I mean, at some point, a family they create. That's what family offices are for, like to manage multi-million-dollar estates. What do you do when you're in this $1 to $3.5 million tuition?
Well, I think the big thing is, and I talk about this in the book too, which is to sort of build a group of people around you that you can trust. Certainly for most people that you describe in that $1 to $3.5 million space, they should have a pretty close relationship with their accountant. They probably have a relationship with a lawyer that they're either using to build their business or otherwise advise on different things. A financial advisor, either at a bank or a trust company or a wirehouse or something like that, many of them have the skills to talk about the things that you talk about as well. And it's important to have, I'd say, a component of all three to be able to sound these ideas out. And then finally, I think reading, for instance, my book and other literature that's out there to try to get some philosophy behind what you're trying to do and some grounding into how to make intelligent decisions, you'll be a better client for them because you'll go in understanding what you want out of your wealth going forward, so that you should try to get the advice that comes in from the economic side of things, to the legal side of things, to the accounting side of things. You're not going to go in there as a David Woods. You say, look, these are some of the things I'm thinking about, and this is why I want to do it. And you get the advice to work for you as opposed to kind of seeking it out.
So it's not a Google search for family office.
Yeah, well, I mean, in a sense, what you're doing is building a family office. I think typically family offices, big ones, where you have an office that supports you individually, you have the wealth to support it, that kind of starts in the 100 million and up range. What you're building is sort of a multi-family office where you've got your own group of people that you trust, that you feel good about, and whose advice you like. They're helping you manage your affairs. I think also, just as a side, this is a small tangent, but many times too, for the people who are sort of building their craft and their business and their family wealth, they use a set of advisors to grow the wealth. Sometimes it's important to get a younger set of advisors, kids feel good about the people that they're dealing with, especially as you get older and retirement age. For the people who advised you, they're retiring too. So you may want to have some consistency as you get from generation to generation.
Well said.
Thank you.
But again, guys, check out the book, Wealth Actually. Amazon, probably the best place to pick it up.
Yep, absolutely. So books on Amazon. There's wealthactually.com and FrazerRice.com. On both of those, my podcast exists, and I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and all the other major platforms.
All right, guys. Take it easy.
Great. Thanks, Lane. Appreciate it.